what's going on, guys? It's me, Train Man, and welcome back to whatchamacallit. We're, wrapping up the scenery in this area today. Or, no. Sorry, scratch that. We're wrapping up the terrain in this area today so that we can get this thing merged, which is... When I came into this, it was the ultimate goal, and I figured it was going to be the latter half of the episode, and that's kind of exactly what it was. So, I'm going to try and pay extra attention to the video because it's going to slow down to 1x speed for about 2 minutes, in about 7 minutes or so. So, we're basically first just going to do the banks of the river, and if you'll notice, the river kind of gets, well, it increases in volume as you get farther. So, I go and grab one of these Waterfall Samples, which Wybold hates, and I can understand that. And now I have to just line it up. So, the Waterfall Samples are something that I've found myself using quite often on these little rivers, except they suck. Because, I don't know, they're tough to blend with the environment, because they're really loud, because there's only one, and you're kind of stuck with it. But, you know, I'm over it. I can get over it. Alright, so we tighten up this river a little bit more, and then we have to fill in the rest of the area, which is just your standard sort of mountain building that we've been doing as of late. The tricky thing here was to keep the river not in a position where it looks like it would flow somewhere else. And that was probably not done very well, as a matter of fact. I just kind of built up a large-ish berm between where it goes and the dip. Because obviously, the area here actually points downhill because we're heading towards the ocean side and the tracks are going downhill. So, the river really isn't the lowest thing here. In fact, it's not even close to being the lowest thing here. The area that I'm working on right here is considerably lower than the level of the actual river water. So, I took care to make sure that it doesn't look like it's that way, even though it really obviously is. Also, I had to make sure that the train tracks weren't very obviously on a sort of berm, which wouldn't really be there for any reason whatsoever. So we also have this weird lake, which I flesh out a little bit and make it look... I make the shape a little less weird. But for a while there, the tracks did look like they were on basically a U-shaped plateau, with the tracks in the middle and then sloped up to either side, and then it sloped down even farther to these areas off to the side. And I don't think I put a lake over here, but this ends up becoming the most lake-filled section, which is kind of what I was going for. My geo teacher was explaining how there was a section of Canada that he used to go to experiment in lakes, and there were like 100 or 10 lakes per square mile. Something ridiculous like that. And he showed us pictures of these experiments that he'd do where they were just they were kettle lakes. They were all completely isolated. They had no feeder streams and no outputs. So when you put something in one of these lakes, for example, nitrate, I think it was one of the big things. They were putting in the lake to see how the lake would respond in terms of life and the pH of the water and things like that. Basically, they were just doing science and seeing how other lakes respond to this kind of thing. They were doing testing for, what would happen in cases where pollutants in certain areas were getting bad. Anyways, he showed us pictures of these lakes where you just kind of, he went and did his experiment and he filled his lake with nitrate and it just turned like a pea soup green, and that looked really obnoxious and really sickly. I don't really know where I was going with that. Anyways, this area would be kind of a lake-filled section. Obviously, as I was pointing out, maybe you'd see some geology teachers and stuff coming here to do experiments on lakes. I don't know. Maybe you can write a plot about that. Anyways, we've moved past the drumlin field, of course. We're sort of in some nondescript hilly terrain. A while there I had to get over the idea that, you know, every hill has to have a reason for existing. You know, what carved this hill? Why would there be a hill here? But, you know, frankly, it could be a variety of different reasons. The way the water flowed, just the way the ground surface is. Could have just been sheer luck that you started to get a hill in a certain area as everything around it eroded. Frankly, one of my questions is how islands form specifically. But that's not a question. Excuse me, that's not a question to have right now. We're trying to build a railroad, not investigate the terrain around said railroad. Something I do try to do, though, when I am building, although I may have talked about this prior, is give the railroad a reason to have built through a certain area. Of course, I'm building off a map and I'm building the tracks first, so, you know, I can sort of, I'm building the terrain around the tracks. However, and I build the terrain around the tracks because doing it the other way around is kind of ludicrous in terms of actually building something in trains in a moderate stretch of time. Because if you spend a lot of time land building, you might actually build something that's impossible to put a railroad line through, and then you have to go back and either find a different way or build something different. You're left with a lot of good-looking terrain if you're good at that. And you can give yourself some pretty serious challenges. But it's just, not that I have anything against doing that, I'm just not going to be doing that myself. I wouldn't be, frankly, I don't think I'm good at terrain building, nor do I have the patience for a lot of the bigger stuff that would be required, and then paving through with a railroad line afterwards, especially considering the kind of shoddy grid system that Terrains has, and building cuts and embankments using it is kind of, I don't know, they don't turn out looking very good. So you're better off building the railroad line and then putting the terrain around it and just making the terrain fit. And on top of that, having a reason for the railroad line to be there. Alright, so here we are on a completely different map, but believe it or not, it's actually the same map. It's about to be. So we come down here, we're going to merge a route. If you guys have never merged a route before, this is how you do it. You bring the thing in, and then you have both of the routes, one on top of the other. And I left a little marker block there. I already measured out where this has to be. I left a little marker block there in the middle of nowhere, and I just have to line it up with below where it says WO. So right about there. And I go into the, obviously the tracks are never going to touch that block, but that's not what matters. The block was just scaffolding. I have to merge the region layers, the route layers, and right now I just did a little experiment. I wasn't sure. Nudge it up, nudge it down, check, check, and then check. And now we have this attached to the narrow gauge. So we've got to get it from Worcester there. I'm making the motion with my mouse. We've got to get it from Worcester there to a town called Providence, which is right here. Now, the town itself isn't really done, and of course the scenery is lacking because it doesn't, I try not to build on a side where I know I'm going to extend the map. If you'll notice in the outer view, there was a line that sort of led into just gray blocks. The reason it did that is because there really isn't any reason to, or rather, I'm not going to continue the work over there because I don't know what I need to connect to over there. I know what it, I should say I know what it is, but I don't have it in a way that I can place it down yet. Also, there was a little bit of a hiccup there with what elevation it was supposed to be at. So, yeah, I need to get in there when I get the actual thing and sort of set it up. Alright, so we've got this railroad track leading off the bottom there, and of course it leads into the drumlin field. Now, something I strive to do, we're about to start placing down tiles, something I strive to do as I place down the tiles was keep as little interaction between this section and that section as possible. I mean, while it's good to have a very large, a very large swath so that you could put tracks on one side of it and see all the way across it for some epic views, it's not, or rather, we've hit the point of no return with the building of the drumlins. We built drumlins right up to the edge of the map, and I'm trying to make as little trouble for myself as possible when it comes down to actually building the terrain here, and that means no sheer edges. We have to, out of Worcester, climb 100 feet to get to Providence, with a minimum grade of 2%. That should be no problem at all, considering the massive amount of distance we can cover here. But we're going to more likely than not be in a valley. Probably a smallish river valley that we will abandon around the time we get to the bulged out section that I just moused around. I'm tracing the path of... Yeah, I just traced the path of where the tracks are going to go. So we're gonna hop from a sort of high plateau-y area, although it's really just going to be hills. We just need to add the hills in. We're going to go from a high plateau hill area to, at the bend there, we're going to meet a river, and we're going to follow that river down. And then we're going to get down here, and we're going to break away from that river, proceed into and through the drumlin field, and end up in Worcester. So I started to do some of this flattening here, but I ended up running out of time and had to go. So next episode, we're going to do either a lot of plateauing and the use terrain tool, or we're going to use copy-pasting to get some big sections of land built up to 200, which is where they need to be, at the very least. That is our minimum, as I've talked about before. Anyways, bye-bye.